Thank you. Welcome everybody for this large committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Firstly, we acknowledge with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples and are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Swepsum nations. This is a unique special council meeting, and it's a combined meeting of both the infrastructure and active transportation committees, which is why it's extra large this time around. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda. Any amendments, additions, deletions?
Just speak to the chairing part first before we approve.
Perfect. Thank you for the reminder, Councillor Day. So because it is a special meeting and there are items that pertain to both committee members, rather than have these items sent to two different committees on two different nights. The hope is that we'll plow through this as a group, each of us with our eyes with regard to your particular committees or whatever questions you may have, and that we can plow through and get to a decision. So that's the reason for the special meeting. And there may be some changes to the structure of these two committees in the future, but there's more to follow because council hasn't digested that. It should be early next month. So yes, having said that, there are two chairs for this meeting this evening, and we are going to trade off at key moments in the meeting when, well, essentially I'm going to get us through the first item, which is 3.1. And then I will pass off to Councillor Day for the infrastructure related, probably 5.1, and then I'll pass off to Councillor Day for 5.2 with regard to Veterans Parkway. So hopefully that's clear for the public. Is there any questions from anyone on committee or staff? Thank you. Seeing none, I'll move us along to approval of the agenda. Looking for a mover to approve the agenda. Perfect. Thank you. That was Stefan. And no seconder required. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you. Adoption of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, 3.1, 3.2. So 3.1, Active Transportation Committee minutes from April the 15th. A mover, please. Thank you, Colin. And anyone opposed to those minutes? Thank you. And 3.2 Infrastructure Committee meeting February 11th, 2025. A mover from this side of the table somewhere. Thank you, Mr. Conrad. And anyone opposed to those minutes? Seeing none, thank you. Sorry? Would you like to discuss the minutes? I'll just back up just a tad. Discussion counts. Committee member Parkinson.
I just wondered about the drainage and sewer info that was supposed to be emailed out. Do we know where that, the status of that is?
If a member of staff might help us.
The minutes said there was that the list of capital projects didn't include drainage and sewage, and they were going to be emailed out.
Thank you for the reminder. I will get on that right away.
Anything else? Anybody else? Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to note there's still a couple items outstanding that are mentioned as coming forward in the minutes, including the sustainable infrastructure plan. Just a gentle reminder that we're still looking for items that we've started to come back to be finished.
Thank you, Councillor Day. That's been noted by staff, I presume. No further directions required. Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Yes, go for it. I think he's over here.
Josh, along the same lines, we were to be provided with an update regarding the sustainable infrastructure plan, and we haven't received that either.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, I believe that's the same topic, correct? Yeah. Thank you.
We've wrote it down twice now, so it'll get extra attention. Any other discussion? I'll give it a moment or two. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed to those minutes other than what's been noted by staff? Thank you. Public participation. We're a little late on public. Is there anyone online? Thank you, staff. We'll conclude public participation. New business, 5.1. We're looking for Tyler Pettypiece.
I'll be presenting in his stead.
We're not looking for Tyler, we're looking for Mr. Baylis. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. A large room. Oh, I can see it on mic going already.
So, committee member Parkinson.
The semantics were a little unclear to me. Buffered bike lanes, I believe, are ones with a stripe. You got a stripe at the edge of the pave running, and so the striped ones, 7.7 meters wide or something is the buffer. And then protected would be if it's the precast curb or some kind of curb. So that's the buffered and that's the protected. Am I correct? And the buffered dash protected program, is that taking buffered lanes to protected, or is that where buffered might suit and where protected might suit? Or is it both, or is it an evolution from buffered to protected?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, this program is intended to be a buffered bike lane turned into a protected bike lane. There are instances inside of Colwood where it's not necessarily there's buffered leading into a standard bike lane, where we then might convert a little section of a standard into a protected as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the real intent and the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about tonight is existing buffered bike lanes and converting those to protected.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Back to you, Mr. Baylis. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll get right into it. Presentation's up. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to do a little bit of, for one committee, you've probably seen much of this presentation already. So we'll cover our program, how it started out, some of the projects the project we've done. But really the intent today is to try to elevate 2 projects for this year and for the budget we have in 2025. To do that, I'll just briefly touch on our connection with the OCP and other guiding principles. So that's covered on this slide. And then we'll move into the pilot project we did on Painter Road. So on Painter Road, we installed, protected bike lane curbs, converting a buffered bike lane into a protected. We did that back in 2023. It was the first project of its kind in Colwood, but not in the region. So here's some facts about how long it took, how many curbs were installed. We self-performed the installation through our Public Works Department. And then I'll just a couple pictures here to show that conversion. And then we did a post-pilot survey. This covers the outcome from that survey, the responses from that survey. While not a great response rate for a survey of its kind and a specific project, not terrible, but we would have liked to have seen more turnout. But even from the limited responses, quite overwhelmingly strongly in favor. So that led us into, okay, this program is benefiting. We want to look at other areas inside of Colwood, hence being here today. Part of the survey was a fill in the blank section. So this is just a word cloud generated based on much of the same phrases used and things like that. So you can see that through this survey, not all of it was positive. You've got dangerous for drivers, but a lot of it and the overwhelming is, we feel much safer, do more of this, things like that. So pivoting into planning for our future locations, we have our existing bike lane network and identifying which areas are protected, standard, buffered, all those things. So this just kind of highlights the information we have at hand. This drills into the existing buffered bike lane locations. And then this is us looking at what we can do in the future. So thinking of transit growth corridor, neighborhood hubs, and applying that lens to the existing infrastructure we have. This is the old decision matrix we used for looking at different locations and where we could consider converting from a buffered bike lane into a protected. We've since developed or are in the process of developing a new matrix that takes into account other areas as well and other treatments. But from this is where we've derived the most recent few projects. So we'll pivot right into them. I apologize in advance. This image here where you can see the little blue cloud just to the sort of middle left of the image, that's supposed to be slightly to the right and up over top of that little, what do you call that color? The salmon underneath Latoria Road. That's the location that we're proposing to do this conversion. And the image on the right is an image looking sort of towards Royal Bay to look at that conversion. So you can see we've got the protected bike lane, and then it also has parking scallop. So it's historically been quite challenging, and we get a lot of comments about functionality or people parking in the bike lane thinking it's just a parking scallop. So this one rose to the higher end of our list very quickly. So this would be our sort of priority project for 2025, and what we're proposing is removing the bump outs that create the scallop parking further into the image there and continuing that bike lane right through and converting it to protected. So that's project number one. Project number two is on Mount View Avenue, connecting onto Souk Road. Here first when we started getting complaints, we were surprised. We didn't think there was a lot of ridership on this bike lane. We've actually got a lot of feedback from the community, and it serves a double purpose. We're finding with the amenities in the area, a lot of people are parking in the bike lane again and on the shoulder, either inadvertently or on purpose, but either way, it's blocking the bike lane and creating an unsafe scenario. So this is an area that we, again, rose high up onto our list. It's small, it's short, it's localized, it's easy to get in, make that conversion. This is one, to your point, around the standard bike lane versus the buffered. This is not a buffered location, but we feel that there should be adequate space, and we'll look at it more closely as we get into the details. But this would be the second proposed location for us in 2025. The last location, if there's enough funds remaining for the 2025 budget, would be to look at the Goldstream Avenue section here. It's unlikely we'd get into this with our budget, so the likelihood would be that we would sooner defer those funds into a future year, rerun the matrix, and other projects might come up, or we would do this in entirety in 2026. But should the first two projects go well and funds allow, this would be our intention, and the recommendation reads that way too, that if there's enough, we would go here. If there isn't, we would look to defer into 2026's program. This is a bit of a timeline and budget. So kind of where we are today, what we're looking to do, get consensus from committee, move into council, get approval, and get working on the projects. Budget breakdown, we have just under 200,000, which is our program from 2024 rolled into our program in 2025. We did not do a buffered bike lane project in 2024. And then that's the conceptual or estimates, I should say, for the two projects that we've put forward, and then the potential surplus. And the recommendation, in simple terms, it's up there for you to read, but it would be to move forward with the Latoria Road and Mount View implementation, and look to Goldstream should funds allow. Any questions or comments or discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. We'll bring that back to the table here and down this way to, is that Stephen?
Sorry, Taylor.
Taylor,
Yeah,
gosh.
that's okay.
Sorry.
There's many new faces. Sorry, I just didn't, maybe I missed the link. Why is Mountain View on there? Because it wasn't on the old matrix. And where it fits in with now. But building on that concept is I look at the Latoria conversion, and it makes sense, get rid of those kind of bump out parking stalls, but maybe wouldn't it make sense to then shift the bike lane over so that parking could also still exist? Bike lane furthest to the sidewalk, then there's still a parking stall if it's protected. And then building on that idea, I look at Mountain View and I say, if we do a protected lane there is no street parking. And I was just there today for gymnastics. It's a very small street. It's a relatively quiet street, but the overflow parking that occurs on the street there for people going to that church or to the gymnastics from what I saw. So that doesn't make sense to get rid of the possibility of people being able to park there. Notably, again, Mount View in light of, say, Goldstream. Goldstream's a main community road. Mount View is a very small side road. Why do it there? Vice save the money now, the 22,000, and put that towards getting Gold Street done sooner? Lots of questions.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The first one around the matrix and not being in the original matrix, you're not wrong. In 2023, and I'll admit this presentation is largely borrowed from 2023. So the matrix step that we took was from that matrix. It did not include Mount View. Since then, we've received a significant amount of complaints, and we've run it through our in draft matrix, which works for bike lanes. Pardon me. But it's not yet endorsed by council, and not everybody's seen it and things like that. So I didn't take a snip of that and include it here. But the rating of that one in the matrix hierarchy, that is where that one sits higher than Goldstream and others. I think to your point, none of the things you're raising are incorrect. It's a point of view. So correct, if we're focusing on providing an amenity of parking on Mount View, we wouldn't go there. ROCP and the hierarchy of what we're looking to do in terms of mode shift and protecting for cyclists and pedestrians would put that higher on a project list. But that's what this committee is for. It's for those opinions. It's for that different lens to say, no, I don't want to see that. I want to see parking amenity. Let's remove the painting that even says it's a bike lane. We could do that. But that's just, this is the discussion to be had tonight.
All right. Hang on, we can fix that.
Yeah. Sorry, I turned myself off. You mentioned complaints, which is. Let's read.
There's names everywhere. Sorry.
You mentioned receiving complaints, which is what generated the reevaluation of Mount View. I just want to better understand the city's mechanism of receiving complaints. Is it the squeaky wheel, or are we actually tracking it's different people, different addresses, multiple concerns, and not just the same guy who rides his bike down that small road every single day?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Absolutely. I think I mentioned complaint because that's what initiates the review. And then it goes through the technical matrix. So it talks about how many people are actually using that as a cycling path. How many trips do we have for vehicles, that conflict zone, proximity to schools, proximity to, it has all those different measures in there. And it doesn't take into account number of complaints. So it's not the, the squeaky wheel or we had a petition signed or anything like that. It is just, it's been mentioned. We run it through the matrix. It hadn't been mentioned in 2023 when we ran the first matrix, and it did in 2024 multiple times. I just mentioned that anecdotally. It doesn't come into the decision point of the technical evaluation through the matrix. Apologies for not clarifying that.
Thank you. Over to, gonna be Stefan. I think I got it. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Joshua. Good presentation. So thank you for considering Latoria Road. That's something I think was brought up at another meeting a while ago. Those scallops seem to be an issue, not just for me. So I think it's a great idea. Can you just clarify on the section of the road how far we get with the $166,000? Does it take us from more or less the roundabout to Beasanton? Does it take us all the way to Wishart? Pardon me. And it's just on the one side there? It's not going to be on the other side. So that's my two questions about that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It's about 170 meters, and it takes you from, it's deleting those two bump outs and then connecting those two locations with the buffered painting and then the parking, or not parking, the protected curbs. So that I actually don't remember specifically the exact stationing or like location to those intersections, but I can certainly return with the markup.
Right.
If Tyler were here, he would have I guarantee it.
Probably to about Beasanton. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Hit your button for me, Stefan. Thank you.
Josh, at some point, do you think we can see the matrix that you use to come up with your final solutions to the, I'm not requesting it now, but at some point, could we see how you develop the matrix and what determines, the order in which you do the projects? Because I noticed throughout all the readings, there's a lot of matrix. You've referred to the matrix. Well, what is the matrix? The second question is, I'm all in favor of protected bike lanes. I don't think people realize that, The human reaction time, the fastest, is 26 milliseconds. And in 26 milliseconds, a car traveling 30 kilometers an hour could actually cross the buffered zone, across the bike lane and be on the sidewalk. So with a protected bike lane, at least it's going to deflect the car back onto the road rather than onto somebody on a bike or a lady pushing, you know, a baby carriage along the sidewalk. So I really do support the protected over the buffered. My only suggestion is if you do put protected barriers down, move the buffered lines into them. Don't leave them out at 800 millimeters because the protected cement barrier is only about 300 millimeters wide. Move it in to allow the traffic to have a wider driving lane. Thank you.
I think the first part was a question, if I may, through the chair. Regarding the matrix, the intent is to bring that forward. We have an approved budget item, $100,000 for safety initiatives. Inside of, I think it's June, is when we'll bring that forward to council. That will be the staff's recommended allocation of that budget, which projects through the matrix, and it will also be the introduction of the finalized matrix. Now, whether that gets referred to committee preemptively or after, whatever that may be, we'll see that outcome. But either through the minutes, the recording, whatever that may be, that matrix will be publicly available at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. All these matrices, I'm going to have to take the red pill, I think. Is it the red pill I want or the blue one? I can't remember. Not the blue one? Okay.
Not blue.
Mr. Parkinson.
Okay. Thank you for that, Joshua. On Victoria Road, I believe, I'm not sure everybody agrees with me, but at some point in not too distant future, that road will be getting 4-laned. And have you looked at the impact of this constructing these bikeways as positive, neutral, negative for the ultimate development of that road?
Yeah, when we look at 4-laning Latoria, which definitely is not imminent, I would feel pretty confident saying it's a minimum of 5 years out and likely 10 or more. The cost to put these down and take them up, even on a 5-year piece, would be more than I think getting your money's worth during that time, because we just pull them all up. So the labor involved in placing and taking them down would be worth the benefit of, even if it was 5 years. Once we go to that 4-lane cross section, because if we did, it would be an arterial road. It's likely those would be protected, not buffered protection. It would be an actual protected bike lane on both sides of the road, potentially. It depends on the ultimate cross section. We're going through right now the North Latoria visioning, which part of that process is to widen that corridor out to about 30 meters, which would allow us to have a treatment that goes well to the creek side. It requires us to realign the creek as well as part of that process, but we haven't made decisions on 4-laning Latoria yet, and we also haven't made the decision on changing that creek yet. So it'll be quite some time before that occurs, and at that time we can make those decisions specifically, but there will be width to allow for a protected bike lane of our usual treatment.
Okay, fair enough. Then just looking at a couple of the pictures that you flashed and that we saw in our package, Mount View, pretty narrow strip of asphalt for the bike lane. So, and then I look at the $22,000 budget. You can't put much new asphalt down for $22,000. How does it fit? Do the 2 lanes of traffic and the 2 buffered or protected bike lanes fit on the existing asphalt, or are you widening the asphalt? And I guess the same question when you look at the picture of Goldstream Avenue, there's a pole right up beside the road. If you're widening asphalt, you got some real doozy of issues to deal with.
Yeah, thanks for the question. There's no consideration for new asphalt or removing any asphalt. This is meant to be a non-intrusive, affordable treatment. So in the event of Mount View, it would likely be lane width there. We would look at the width of that relative to the, I mean, it's fog lane or bike lane line, whatever that is, to center line. We might put the curbs a little bit closer to center line, making that, it's a local road. There's probably space for that. And we wouldn't look to even implement the 0.7 meter painting here. We would just place the curb with the little delineators on top. And honestly, we'd probably look to see a narrower bike lane. So that paint might be 1.8 right now. It might go down to a 1.5. Again, that protection, but a narrower bike lane would be an appropriate toss up relative to the amenity given to a cyclist in that area, is what we're looking at right now for Mount View.
And Goldstream?
Goldstream, I think we're buffered there. I'm not sure.
I think the
What was
picture,
your comment there? Sorry.
well, it's the same issues that, you know, widening there, you're gonna run into a hydro pole. And so same thing, you're looking at narrowing travel lanes and narrowing bike lanes and narrowing protection to fit within the existing asphalt.
To look back, apologies. I think Goldstream on the is just the one side, and it was a buffered.
Yeah.
It seemed to find my page. Near the end.
Yeah, so
Oh, here we go.
does it all fit without having to move poles?
Yeah, we certainly won't be moving poles, so it'd be the same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and I guess my only other comment is, if we see the first two projects coming in under budget, I'd say that's good, attaboys and attagirls for the people who accomplished that, good. But the concept of if there's money left over, let's spend it somewhere else, I think I'd rather see it deferred until, you know, council can decide what its priorities are and stuff. That, you know, I don't, just sort of smacks of, we've got a budget, we've got to spend it all, and I don't have that philosophy. And so if there's money left over, I could see it going back into the kitty for next year's projects or whatever's decided. My thoughts.
Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you. That would be the intent. I mean, we do have a 5-year program within that current service review. So any funds that aren't spent do automatically get carried forward to the following year. So it is, I think, 100,000 a year for the next 5 years. So we didn't spend any last year. That's why we have approximately 200,000 this year. And if there was, and I agree, economies of scale, we're not going to do like a third of Goldstream this year because it wouldn't make sense from economies of scale. So unless we can do that entire project with the funds that are remaining, because we see it as the next priority, we wouldn't do it. We would then go forward and then bring a full package back to council in the following year with 100 plus whatever we had for that year. And in some cases, if we see some benefit, we might even try to draw from the future years to come back to finish a project rather than delay a year to do it. So having the 5-year program does help give us some flexibility with the way to proceed.
Let's go to Councillor Day, sorry.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask about transit. So especially on Latoria Road, there's a transit stop right where those scallops are. And I agree the scallops haven't been very functional. But the other factor besides transit that was mentioned was parking. And I really don't know if we should be facilitating parking in an area where it's not likely to be permanently available. So that's a major roadway. I can't remember what its exact classification is, but when we're putting down the asphalt at the cost that it is, I don't think we're trying to build parking for people. We're trying to build roadways and transportation corridors. So I know we play devil's advocate with that, especially where we get into more residential areas. But with transit needing to be a priority and cycling safety needing to be a priority, I don't know if parking should be there or not be there. So I was just looking to hear what staff's perspective on that is.
Sorry, Councillor Day, can you clarify? Are you talking Latoria Road?
I'm talking about Latoria Road, but it's also applicable on Goldstream
Yeah.
Avenue because that's a major transportation corridor and has probably the most frequent bus service on that corridor. So I just want to know how that, I mean, I completely, it's something that annoys me every time I go down Goldstream Road, seeing all the people parked there. Because, I mean, they're doing damage and adding very little. So it just doesn't seem like a good thing to be trying to facilitate, but I'm open to hearing what the reasoning is, and I'd just like to understand, are we facilitating parking on major corridors? And are we making plans for transit?
Yeah, so on the transit front, we certainly, once we get an endorsed plan from council, we coordinate with BC Transit and any other road users to make sure that placement of those curbs don't, stop people from accessing their driveways, stop buses from being able to pull over, whatever that might be. So we do coordinate with those groups. Just in reference to this program on Latoria, we're intending to remove the parking amenity there and have that converted to bike lane. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. None of this is from a staff perspective, are we saying we should create parking in these locations? It's creating protected bike lanes only, and in one instance, removing parking. And then at a higher level, yeah, we, as hierarchy of roads increase or arterials, we definitely try to limit parking. Collectors a little less so, and locals even more. So that would be the hierarchy of where we go relative to parking.
And I can just add from a perspective and philosophically, we do not like to see bikes parking and transit mixing, because that does create exceptional amount of conflict, both on a parallel scheme with regards to dooring, and then on a perpendicular scheme with regards to path and of cycles and cars. So typically that would be a technical decision, would be not to have the parking there. And then a social decision would be maybe try to add some parking as safely as you can. But if you're asking strictly from a technical point of view, we would not like to mix the two.
And I just wanted to, so Mount View is a little bit of a different roadway, but I do know that it's an important route for school. And one of the uses that's in this area that is causing the conflicts is there's a wonderful dojo there, but they don't, they are parking in the bike lane, and it is definitely problematic. And it's one of the safer ways for families to commute through Colwood to use Mount View, because you can go all the way to Herb Williams Park from there, for example, without having to be on a major roadway. So I think that's an area where, your compromise may be something that we have to check in on. Goldstream Avenue, I'd really like to see a plan come forward to know exactly what we're doing. And I'd love to hear from the Active Transportation Committee members on that, because Goldstream is increasingly an extremely busy 2-lane road with ample amounts of transit on it, but huge volume delays at times. So it is a problem, and maybe there are some areas that a small amount of funding, you could put down some curbs that would increase safety and discourage parking that might be impeding view corridors for entrance or whatever. But I'd really like to look carefully at what we do there.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Back to Taylor. Here we go. There we go.
Sorry, Goldstream, I just want to clarify, is it both sides or just one side that we're looking at? Question one.
Thank you for the question. I believe it's the one side, but I'm nervous saying that confidently, if I'm being honest.
The
I'd
side
have to
without
circle
all the
back.
cars?
Sorry?
The side without all the cars parked along it?
I believe you're correct, yes.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense, because while I don't disagree with we might not want to facilitate parking, parking is being done in these places. So if we were to do something drastic where we got rid of all of that, that parking would be facilitated somewhere else, one way or the other. So we need to be very conscious of that. And same idea on Latoria, those scallops do provide spots that I see full, I think, every day. So I'm hesitant to say, let's just get rid of them. Granted, you don't want to mix transit, bikes, all that. So that just something to put out there. The only other question I had with Goldstream was when you made your presentation, you mentioned it didn't sound like the door was shut on Goldstream with respect to this year in the budget. Is the door blown open if we use that 22,000 from Mountain View, put it towards Goldstream? Is Goldstream done at that point if we pass over Mountain View, or are we still not likely to get it done?
I'm still on. Thank you, through the chair. Pardon me. The 22,000 of not doing Mount View would not be sufficient as we estimate right now. There might be some efficiencies gained and things. The big project is Latoria. If that goes really well and we're under budget, we have contingencies, things like that. If we don't end up tapping into those, there's a possibility of Goldstream. But it arguably, we probably should have just said we're intending to defer into 2026. It's quite a long shot. It's a project we wanted to discuss in the hierarchy and the next project on the list. But we could certainly look at Latoria, do that one first, and then see where we land. The hierarchy of projects could just be what we discussed tonight and come up with that. And that would be no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. And from what I'm hearing here, that I just reflected on the motion that's suggested. It does have some language in there about Goldstream, but I think you've heard some concerns here from committee that we would like to see designs. And then if it's not going to happen anyways, and maybe we can kind of retool that motion when it comes time. I'm seeing a couple of nods. Perfect, Mr. Conrad.
Josh, 2 questions. Do you know what your placement cost is per lineal meter for the protected bike lanes? My reasoning for that is if we have some money left over and we decide to put protected bike lanes on another street, if it is an insurmountable cost, it's not a big deal to lift them and place them somewhere else at a future time, or if that road needs construction, to lift them to do the construction, then place them back.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be interesting to know what the lineal costs would be for the placement there. Secondly, on Mount View, and you may have said this and I might have missed it, so I'm sorry, but is your idea to put the placement of the protected bike lanes on the inside of that white line to narrow the bike lane, or to put it on the outside of the white line to narrow the driving lane? Because that makes a big difference. And finally, if I could, just one suggestion. The cones, the reflective cones that you put on the top of the protected barriers, we seem to use one that's about, 800 centimeters in height. Saanich uses one about 500. And if you look at the difference, it looks much more professional because any irregularities on the top of that solid barrier with the longer length, they're leaning each way, where the shorter one looks nice and straight in a line, looks much more professional. So we may want to consider using those over the taller white ones, is a suggestion I'd have.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, through the chair, question 1 on linear cost. It's tough to say exactly, but on average, that's a hot mic, sorry. On average, we're about 130 per lineal meter. Now that varies depending on how many driveways you have and the number of curbs you're putting down. Installation cost is about 10 to 15% of that. So we figure to re those to another location, again, depending on location, distance from the existing installation, anywhere from about 20% of the original cost to 30% of the original cost to relocate those and reuse them. So I'd be picking them up, transporting them, and putting them back down. So 30 cents on the dollar to re-implement them, which feels quite efficient relative to a capital cost and be able to reuse something in that way. And then your point on Mount View and location, it would likely be a hybrid. We would probably cut into the bike lane a little bit and the road width as well. We haven't gone out and specifically measured that lane width from center line to that area. But we would use best practices and guidelines to not limit traffic on a local too much by narrowing it too much, and same with a bike lane. But that would be, we'd be striking the best happy medium we could from a technical perspective.
I'll maybe go to Mr. Rosenberg first if he has a thought. Thanks, Angus.
Thank you. Just from a philosophical tenet with regards to speed and bikes and local traffic. We generally want to narrow lanes down as narrow as we can get them, because the wider the lane width is. In the old days, we'd have these 4.5-meter raceways for kids to have an excellent hockey game on, get their hockey nets out, be able to pull the net to the side. Those days are gone. We want a very narrow road. Local roads where we don't anticipate a lot of truck traffic, we're okay with getting down to a 3-meter lane. We want people to feel a little uncomfortable as two cars are passing, so that they slow down in those local streets when we've got lots of driveways, potentially lots of kids. So we would try to keep and maintain in Mountain View a 3-meter lane, but we wouldn't want to put the buffered side of the concrete on the inside of the bike lane to narrow the bike lane to allow for, say, a 3.5-meter lane width in that area. We'd put it to the outside so that it would only be, say, 3.1, 3.3, and then still have a normal sized bike lane. So the first piece would be to give the bikes that. Keeps the speeds down. Again, when we're talking about bike traffic and car traffic, anytime we can kind of keep those two speeds closer together, so that that deviance is what causes the danger. When the bike's only doing 5 kilometers up a hill and the car's doing, 60 or 70 kilometers down the hill, even though that's not the speed limit, that's where we run into problems. But if we can have that distance between a bike traveling at 15, 20K and a car that's uncomfortable only traveling at 35K, a lot less problems happen when there is that conflict. So we tend to try to keep those lanes narrow in that particular case.
Thank you. Angus.
I'm just trying to put myself in the position of one of the people that park on Latoria. And so I'm understanding now that the bike lane is going to be where I park. And is there going to be no parking signs up there then? So that all that parking is going to go? And so because the parking's not going to be on the other side of the bike lane? Is that? No, so it's no parking now. So potentially how many parking spaces are we losing when we put this in?
Yeah, through the chair, I think it's 3 or 4. Again, I should have that number exact, but I don't. There's existing parking scallops that are being proposed to be removed. Further down Latoria, it's still the shoulder. There's width and people are parking on that side. So the amenity of parking is quite limited that's being removed. But yeah, there won't be any no parking signs because there will be buffered, protected bike lane curbs that are actually physically stopping people from entering that bike lane now.
But we're potentially could be a part of this, letting people know that this is going to be happening.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think with all these development that's going on along there, it's potentially going to not be a popular thing to do. I know that people expect it, especially with schools being close by and stuff, but it's just that it keeps sort of, I think it would have been better to tie it in with the development that was already established with the bike lanes so that it looked more continuous. I think there's going to be a gap. It sounds like that was what the question was, that was there going to be a gap between what's further down the road to this? And so I would like to see that extra money go to fixing that gap. So this is continuous and we have less frustrated people. They can see that this is actually a continuous type of thing that's happening on one side of the road. I think that would be much better money spent fixing that up and getting rid of that gap that's there.
Yeah, to your point, I think one of the things to clarify is the parking scallops right now introduce a break in the bike lane amenity. So you have to go from a protected bike lane to a sharrow back into a protected or a buffered bike lane, hit another parking scallop. Like it's confusing and really not continuous right now. To your point of would it be nice to go the whole way through and do protected? Yes, but there is biking facility, whether it be buffered. I actually think it's all buffered and no standard there. So we're looking to continue that, but the further down where it's already buffered and people are used to that, and the money spent in a protected bike lane conversion could be better spent from a technical perspective up in Mount View or Goldstream. But this area where there is no amenity and people are having to drop back into active traffic and back, we could remove those parking scallops and the jut outs and just paint buffered. But to add these curbs when you're already there, and it just makes sense to get that continuation through and protect it while we're at it.
So
to
is
continue
anything
that
gonna,
through.
so the parking spaces is what's gonna stop the people from just moving down at the end of the bike lane and park there?
They won't be able to. That area past Benzanton, there's no parking. It is all bike lane. And that will be all part of the protected buffered bike lane all the way to Pondside. So we get almost to Wishart. And then in that last little stretch, it's a typical bike lane. So there'll be no opportunity to park anywhere.
There's no
from
opportunity in there.
BMP
Okay.
all the way down to Wishart. So it'll all be removed. And just a point to add, and I don't think Joshua was part of the previous conversation that Tyler and I had when we were talking about this program. Those parking areas there are currently almost always empty. Very rarely are we seeing cars. I think so far with the developments and the parking that council has made them provide in the developments, there hasn't been a real issue with on-street parking, especially on Latoria. It is kind of a pretty good walk to go back up into those developments. I don't think people are using them much. So very rarely do we on any given day see one or two cars in there. So we don't anticipate it's going to cause much of a problem. Now moving forward with more development, perhaps it will, but again, there won't be any opportunity to park anywhere on that street to cause that problem anyways.
And then just to clarify your last note around communication, with all these projects, and I think there's a section in the report, we work with our communications department. We go through our social media, we post physical, I don't know if it's QR codes or links to our website with what we're doing, what we're planning. Those go physically at the sites, so people that are using that would see that, be able to, what's going to happen here. So we do our best to inform people of the changes coming up. We don't always get it right or perfect, but we certainly aim to.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. So I would like to start steering this towards a decision point. People feel like they have enough information at this point in time. I feel like we should do something with this recommendation. So what I've heard as the chair is there's a lot of questions about Goldstream Avenue, and I would just wonder if I would look for perhaps an amending motion to remove any language from the motion about Goldstream Avenue, because I think we're confusing the issue. Do we agree? Thank you, Taylor.
I was going to propose that we remove the Mount View for now, as well as use the authorized remaining budget to implement, and just say, and that staff further develop plans to implement protected bike lane improvements in the Triangle Lands areas as the next priority.
Okay, I want you to hold that thought for just a half a tick, because I think what we're going to do just to keep this nice and clean is I would like to, can someone make a motion to sever this and let's dice this up into smaller section? Thank you. Committee member Parkinson, no seconder required. Is anyone opposed to that? Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. So I would like to parse this up. First and foremost, let's, the first piece to that is Latoria Road. Are we good with that? I don't want to confuse the issue, and give me a wave if we're going too fast. So calling the first question, which would be Latoria Road.
There's discussion.
I'd make the motion that the Active Transportation and Special Infrastructure Committee recommend to council that the 2028 buffered to protected bike lane conversion priorities for Latoria Road be implemented.
Thank you. So we have a motion. I like that motion. Thank you. And discussion. Everybody feels like they're good. Thank you. Let's actually call the vote. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. So this. Hit your button. Yeah, thanks. And thank you for that pre-work you did on that motion, Stuart. Or while we were working here, you were tapping away on your phone. So second piece to that now is Mount View. Let's talk about Mount View. Thank you. So Councillor Day will put forward a motion with regard to the works on Mount View. And I would like to come to you, Taylor, if you want to hit your button for discussion, because it felt like you had something to say.
So I'm going to move that Mount View Avenue be recommended to council for the 2025 buffered and protected bike lane conversion priorities.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Discussion, Taylor?
No, I don't have any discussion. It'll come out in the vote.
Thank you. And I feel like you had
Wavering here.
you had something to say there. Go ahead.
I just, I'm not getting the warm fuzzy that Mount View needs to be a priority based on the complaints we've received and the mechanism of how we look into prioritizing a project. I'm not confident that it's not the same person or the same 5 people. It's a smaller road. It's certainly not as busy as Latoria or Goldstream. And I would rather see money saved on something small to be able to put towards something more impactful, which I would consider Goldstream to be significantly more impactful than Mount View.
Thank you so much. And that was eloquent. Stefan.
I concur. I was just going to wait for the vote, but yeah, I agree. Latoria is a priority. Goldstream's a priority. You said you're going to have a matrix review. We're going to look at budget items. We're going to look at the whole thing again and restack the deck. Mount View feels like some of the roads that are currently in Saanich or even downtown Victoria that are they just have Sharons or whatever. It doesn't feel like it needs to be protected from trucks, from people going too fast, from development that is literally leaps and bounds. So I'm going to concur with what you said.
Thank you so much, Mr. Doyle. Just a couple of comments from me or question firstly to our engineering team. Mount View, is it a collector or is it what's the definition of that? Or
Mount View's a local.
I almost said matrix. What does the matrix tell us? Local road, perfect, thank you. And have we done any work as far as going out there and having a look at it and gaining an understanding of usage on the part of pedestrians and cyclists or at the counter or anything like that?
Yeah, we have done some of that work. I guess it's interesting, the discussion here on the parking and things like that. A lot of that, the conflict is what comes up in our matrix as well from a technical perspective. So the use of that parking lot and the overflow into the local street creates a lot of conflicts for cyclists. Granted, it's local, but the Sharo aspect, when you have a business operating on a local road like that, it's people rushing in, rushing out, making a lot of turns, U-turns, multiple point turns, and that's the feedback we're getting from the people. And then the filter that we put into the matrix is around, there's close proximity to a business, there's close proximity to a school. Yeah. So it is elevated in our matrix, but it'll remain on the matrix and we'll filter it back through another technical analysis and no issue.
Thank you. I concur. I'm conflicted a little bit because it's a natural route to get through to the Goose Trail and over through the back of Hatley Gardens there, the Hatley Cemetery to connect to the Goose Trail and the other areas. So I'm a little bit conflicted, but you don't want to hear from me. Back to, is that Mr. Parkinson? Thank you.
So I'm like you, I'm a little conflicted here. And I'm wondering if we don't pass a motion to move forward on Mount View, when we could expect to receive back some of the information that it seems like people are lacking. I mean, I got to admit, I have no idea how many people park on Mount View Road. I'm taking your word for it. There's some of them, and so when would we sort of get that? When would we have a chance to gather some more information to make a decision?
It's likely with the current workloads that staff wouldn't bring that back into the next year's service review and bring it back as a total package for consideration for council amongst other projects, and then have them determine where they bring that up in the hierarchy. So for instance, if we take that 22,000 plus whatever's left over after Latoria, we would add that to next year's project list and then come back with 2 or 3 options, depending. Goldstream might come back at 125,000 and it might be the only choice. Or it might be where we'd like to do Mountain View and 2 or 3 other little projects, or Goldstream, your choice. Or ask council to elevate monies forward from, say, the 2027 plan to do all of those projects. So it'll be part of that discussion then. So really your discussion is about Mountain View this year or for future consideration.
Well, that's unfortunate, but I guess that's facts. So, okay, thank you.
So it gets tossed back into the matrix and churns out sometime in the future, Councillor Day.
Thanks. I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in because I do know this area. I have seen that it is a problem. And I just want to remind people that this is a safe route to school for Colwood Elementary, as well as the First Nations daycare and education center on Souk Road. So it is an area that I see families using. And I think it is, I know it's a smaller road, but I think council bears some responsibility for approving a business use in a very residential area to ensure that it stays safe for active transportation within our community to do things that are important to families, like getting from the park to the school, to and from. And I think it's a fairly small investment. It's plunking down some curbs on one side, pretty much, I think, of a fairly short section of road. So it's a quick win in some ways, and nothing is lost if it somehow interferes too much. Then, you know, but I think leaving this to Sharrows for the safety aspects is not really in the best interest of the community.
Taylor.
Well, one question, one comment. This I think I know the answer. Mountain View doesn't factor into anything to do with sidewalks or anything like that, because if I'm not mistaken, there isn't a sidewalk down Mountain View.
Correct, there's not a sidewalk in it. Are you asking about future projects? Does it play into?
There is at the corner, but
return, yeah.
the duration of Mountain View
That's
is not sidewalk. Is it on the plans for sidewalks or anything? Because it would seem counterproductive to do bike lanes and then have it come up on the sidewalk side as well. So that's question 1.
Yeah, good question. I have to go review the active transportation network plan that is in draft right now. But that's being implemented back into our TMP, which is actively being worked on right now with our engagement strategy. So staff have taken that plan as draft and we're no longer raising projects from that anyway. But within the next, I think it was the 5-year hierarchy, Mountain View was not on that. So again, from John's perspective of that 5-year model with these temporary installs, we had no concern with putting those in that. Granted, we don't have an ATMP pumping out projects yet. And even inside of the 5-year window, it wasn't there. I could go back and look if it's in the 10-year horizon or anything else, but no, it's not in the near future. So we'd certainly see a benefit from that investment.
Is that being reconsidered with the completion of the daycare and the you know, all the uses that were just mentioned of that area?
Yeah, through the TMP, 100%.
Okay, so then my comment, adding on what was just said, is while I don't disagree, you know, small wins are great. I go back to my original comment, which is we don't have enough information. We don't know sidewalk priority. We don't know ultimately what the user rate is like on that road. But one big thing we're missing is we don't know the impact that this will have on Victoria Gymnastics, which is extremely family oriented and uses parking, or the church, which is extremely family oriented and uses parking, or the dojo, which is family oriented and uses the parking. And so while getting to and from schools is one thing, I think we are still missing information to make an informed decision. So I would advocate that Mountain View is left off of any sort of approval right now, other than let's do some more exploring.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure where we sit with this. I don't know if the motion was going to be tabled or, because I would like clarification from Josh and John I heard Josh say if they put protected barriers in,
Mhm.
they would basically try to straddle the white line. John's saying, well, we want to try and make those roads as narrow as possible, which means then the barrier could possibly go on the outside of the white line. I'm a proponent thinking that we're going too far. We're narrowing roads too much and making it too difficult for people to drive. If you get a box truck going down that road with 10-foot box and a car coming up, one has to pull over to let the other one by. And I don't think drivers should have to do that on a road. I think both vehicles in opposite direction should be able to drive without worrying, sideswiping the vehicle coming on. So I would be proposed, if we're going forward, if we're going to put the protected barriers on the outside of the white line, I would rather, as a cyclist, cycle in a narrower bike lane that's protected than a wider bike lane that's not. So if I'm going to vote in favor of this, I have to know where that barrier is going to go.
Thank you, staff.
Sorry, Roger, I should have clarified. I mentioned take a hybrid approach, which is just to say that bike lane is, I believe it's 1.5 right now. Road width, I haven't gone and measured physically. We took an aerial view, pulled the dimension. I think it's a 3.5 right now, a 3.8, something like that. And John is absolutely correct. We would look to maintain a safe and more standard. So a 1.8 minimum is what our standard is for bike lanes right now. If we could achieve that while minimizing the lane width to anything above a 3 meter, we would do that first in terms of the hierarchy.
Rebuttal, go ahead.
So I understand that, but a car traveling 30 kilometers an hour or 40 or 50, as they're allowed to do on that road, is a lot more dangerous than a bike that's doing 15 or 20 in a 1.5, say, or 1.8. So in this perspective, I would say it would be better to narrow the bike lane and keep the road at a safe width than it would be to widen the bike lane and narrow the road at a speed of 50 kilometers an hour, which is the legal limit. And unless we're going to go the whole city wide and reduce speeds in residential areas to 30 or 40, but I would suggest 30, then I think we're going too far in narrowing the road widths. Go downtown now. People are avoiding it simply because it's too difficult to drive. In a bus coming down Pandora, cars have to pull over to let the bus go by. That's going too far. A car should be able to drive in their own lane without being obstructed by an oncoming vehicle. And that's the way my philosophy in any community should be.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Councillor Jordison, thank you.
I just wanted to mention that I think there's a lot more room because I don't believe we've gone back to the property line either as per council's previous direction to go back to the property line for sidewalks and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of space there that we still have available if that's an issue. Just wanted to point that out. I think like that green area there that I'm looking at in this one picture there, pretty sure it's probably not all, it's probably city property. So there's plenty of room to move back without making the roadway smaller or the bike lanes smaller. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jordison. I would like to get us to a decision point, Taylor. Thank you. Last kick at the can, hopefully.
Yeah, last pick. I just had good point on the property line. I don't know it, but the fundamental thing that we heard tonight was no new asphalt going down anyway. So going back to the property line is going to be a gravel or a grass bike lane, which is not going to do us any good.
Thank you, Taylor. So I would like to bring this back to a decision point. Can we review what the motion was, Madam Secretary, please? Oh, I was just hoping you'd read it. This is the Cadillac here. The active transportation committee meetings. Perfect. So this motion, this is the second piece to this motion that the special, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, thought it said Siri. So apologies. And I do have it on silent. It's just for making notes so I remember my questions. My motion was to include Mountain View Avenue, not that it not be endorsed.
So it's to include it and do the works this year. Thank you. No seconder required. I would like to put this to a question. I will call all those in favor and opposed. And that motion fails. The third part to that was the Latoria, the Goldstream Road. Would a referral or a deferral be acceptable to 2026 or something like that? Perfect. Did someone care to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Day. And it is a deferral to 2026. Is that adequate? Because if we refer it, then someone has to report back at some point.
The Goldstream Avenue be deferred on the priority list to 2026.
Is that good? Thank you. Seeing discussion. There you go, Tina.
I was just gonna say deferral sounds passive, as if we're just gonna wait, whereas I think we want some activity done with respect to the Goldstream
Gotcha.
option, some more investigating, better understanding of the impacts to parking, transit impacts down that corridor. et
So
cetera.
I think let's not get stuck on the word deferral. It's just one of Robert's rules mechanisms to refer something back to staff. So I believe that it'll be organic that work will be being conducted because it will come out on 2026. Are we?
That's correct, Chair. This will form the discussion points in the 2026 service review.
So it won't just die on the vine. Work will be done on it. It's just a matter of how to get it back to staff procedurally. Everybody good?
Getting it back to council, actually. So the recommendation from this committee is my motion that I made is that it be included in the priorities for 2026. So that it's not being forgotten about. It's just we're saying we don't have enough information yet. We need a more detailed idea of what we're proposing there so that we've considered all the options.
Thank you for the clarity, Councillor Day. Stefan.
Just want to clarify, do we have to put anything in motions regarding the budget items? So there was an initial budget, 3 projects asked. I think we asked for the one at 160 something thousand. I'm just wondering if we as a committee have to do anything, say anything about what we'd like to do with that budget, or was that already built into the deferral or some of those languages? So I'm just maybe asking a point of order question.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. But in essence, if we don't commit to that project, that money just stays where it is. Unless another priority comes back to the committee and we can use that fund. Am I clear or is that fair? Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg.
That's correct, Chair. I mean, obviously at any time, council could have a project that comes to mind through public engagement. We obviously have the Ideas Fair coming up. Council may see something or hear something at that point and go, we'd like to pivot and do this other project or have staff look at it. So the intent would be these funds would be saved and used in the 2026 discussions, but realizing that council does have the prerogative to do other projects at any time.
It's not like the senior levels of government where it goes to general revenue and disappears forever. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up. I can't remember who said it, but a member of the table here tonight did mention that they would prefer to see one complete area rather than a little bit here and a little bit there. And this, the result of tonight's discussions has resulted in us only approving Latoria Road thus far, but I did hear an interest in further work being done on Latoria. So I think that it would make sense to potentially recommend to council that we consider potential for extending the area of Latoria with protected bike lanes with the available funding this year.
Okay, there's a lot there.
So,
Can we, let's.
Would you like a motion?
I was just gonna say, can we conclude the motion that we have before us already? Maybe
Sure.
circle back?
Yeah.
Just to keep it nice and clean. Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, I would like to call the question, which is to put that portion, the Goldstream portion, off to the 2026 considerations or deliberations. All those in favor? And opposed? See nobody opposed, that motion is carried unanimous. I will circle back to Councillor Day. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I forgot we hadn't voted. My mind gets going too far ahead. So my motion is that we recommend to council that staff consider a more complete Latoria Road protected bike lane with the available capital in 2025.
I'll turn to Madam Corporate Officer. We'll wait for you to catch up. And in the meantime, Mr. Rosenberg or staff member, is that explicit enough or do we need some clarity?
Thank you, Chair. What I just heard Councillor Day says that there's an opportunity to extend the Latoria Bike Lane Buffer Program this year. We'd like to take a look at that option.
That's what I'm hearing. But I also heard from you, or I understood that a lot of that stretch is already meets our standards. So I guess.
We're currently good to Latoria, on Latoria, basically from VMP to Wishart is where we'll get to. Moving down from Wishart towards Quarry would take some investigation because there are some planned frontage works by Gablecraft in the next year or two. So that would be where when we talk about the funding and spending our money and trying to get, reasonable amount of funds expended, 20-30%, as Joshua said, we're comfortable with 5 years plus. Knowing that Quarry Park area and that piece by the park where we just built is likely to have frontage works happen in the next 5 years, I'd be hesitant, but I wouldn't want to say no. So we'd want to look at that, but it's likely we wouldn't go any further.
We certainly don't want to see finite funds wasted, but your point is taken. Is that Mr. Parkinson or? Thank you.
Thank you. This motion goes back to sort of my earlier concern about the Goldstream. It's just let's spend the budget on something. I have to believe that staff went out and looked at what made sense and where the limits have made sense and brought that forward to us to look at, and now to sort of go and let's do a bit more without the same analysis or without really knowing what we're talking about. All we're saying here is, well, let's spend all the money in the budget because it's in the budget. I can't support that philosophy. I'm quite confident that there's rational reasons for the start and the stop of this project the way it is now. And if there's better things to do, well, there's a process that staff or anybody can bring it forward. But just to say, let's go spend the money because it's in the budget, not the way I like to operate. So I would vote against your motion, Councillor Day, reluctantly. But
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. I did it again, sorry. Mr. Parkinson, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, what I heard staff say was that the project that's before us that was scoped out was to Besanton, removing those parking scallops. And then there is in existence a unprotected buffered bike lane to Pondside, but at Pondside, between Pondside and Latoria Creek Park, there is an issue there, and it's very unsafe because when cars are turning left onto Wishart off Latoria, often the following car veers into either the parking area or the bike lane, whatever you want to call it, because it's not marked as anything right now. And that is the area that I was hoping to address. I wouldn't want to go into any areas that development has already got plans for.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Back to the Parkinson Workman duo.
Yeah, I just want to add, happy with where we went with Latoria earlier based on, 4 parking spots and not very busy. But once we get into that Latoria Creek area where people do have to park on the side in order to access a significant amenity that people really like, I'm hesitant to go any further. So more exploration and understanding as to what could be done there without impacting parking. I agree. If we're there, let's do it. But once we start to get into the area where people are parking to access Torrey Creek Park, then I would have to draw the line there for myself. So I don't know how that fits in the motion or not, but.
Thank you, Taylor. Comments from the chair, absent some kind of diagram or photos or feedback from staff, I'd find it difficult to apply funds to something
Have an amendment.
that I have a tough time visualizing. And I'll circle back to, you're going to amend your own motion, are you?
I am going to amend my own motion because I hear
Do you
you. I
wanna-
hear that. No, it's,
Would it
I
be
just
cleaner
wanna
to
make it
withdraw
specific.
or no?
No,
And
just a couple of words.
thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just from Besanton, that we consider protected bike lane from Besanton to Latoria Creek Park. Like, not interfere with the parking for Latoria Creek Park, just stop right there.
To the crosswalk.
Yeah, to the
Yeah.
crosswalk. Yeah. Just to make people safe.
If a corporate officer, give me a nod. Are we all caught up? Perfect, thank you. And so we have an amendment. So firstly, I would like to call the amendment. So I'll bring that back to everybody here. The amendment is that it would extend from Besanton down to Latoria Creek Park for a separated bike lane. Buffered, separated, separated bike lane? Protected bike lane. Thank you for the verbiage. Discussion, thank you. Mr. Workman? No, it's the other half.
It's twin brother. I guess I'd like to hear from staff. I mean, it seems surprising to me that there's a critical piece of work just next to the work they're proposing to be done that hasn't been thought of or addressed or considered. So I give them a chance to defend themselves.
Joshua and I are at a slight disadvantage because this isn't our individual project. So Tyler knows the intimate details. Our expectation was that this program would take us to Wishart. What Councillor Day is suggesting is taking us basically through Wishart. And it would make sense that would be where we end, would be at that crosswalk without getting into that parking area for the park. So I don't actually need direction. I have enough authority and enough ability to say, I'm hearing if the committee is saying that's what they'd like to do, it's quite likely we would do that with or without a recommendation here. But going into the park would be problematic for me with regards to the parking consequence. So you can do with that information what you'd like.
Thank you, Mr.
So am I hearing this correctly that the works now are proposed to end on the, let's say that's the west side of the Wishart intersection, and this motion was to consider taking it across to the east side of the intersection? Is that what we're talking about? And are you sure that nobody's looked at that already and said it makes sense, we should do it, or we shouldn't?
I'm sure somebody has. They're just not in the room. They're away this evening. So I'm confident that Tyler would tell us if he were here, I already looked at that and we're going to, or I already looked at that and we can't. Joshua and I at this moment in time just don't know what that answer is. But I'm confident that if it's acceptable from a technical point of view and available from a cost point of view, meaning we don't have to pave, we don't have to dig out any ground, it'll be done as part of this project this year.
And when you talk about if it's affordable, would that mean within the 176 that we talked about before, I think was the number, or is that within the 200 or 199.8, whatever?
It would not be over 200, and if to complete the project was 168, I'd put my job on the line for $2,000, yes. I will not put it on the line over 200 because I don't have the authority to spend that. But if the project is 145 and to get to the end is 148, we'd spend that. Again, it's about reasonableness. I know the amount that we have for the year is 200,000. We'll spend under that. And if this project, it's an estimate of 166, which includes contingency, which includes accounting for weather and traffic and so on. So it may very well be 168 by the time we're done, or 170, but we're hoping it's going to be like 150. And that's why we suggested perhaps the Goldstream piece might be viable. But again, we'll find out.
You don't mean the Goldstream piece, do you? You mean the Wishart piece?
No, well.
No, I think I mean
deferred
the
the
Goldstream
Goldstream
piece
part.
with regards to monies left over after Mount View and Latoria. We were hoping that we'd have the difference between the two plus some money left over.
Okay, well, we've
Latoria.
dealt with that, I think. So we can leave that, but I would suggest that probably is your job to stretch the funds here to make them go. So I don't have an issue with that. And just, as you said, it's too bad the guy who knows isn't here.
Yeah, that's, thank you, Mr. Parkinson. And I would like to get us to a decision point. We have a lot of road cross sections to go through, people. I believe next is.
Josh, could you bring up the map you had where the staff proposed section was going to be done? I'm a visual learner and I would like to know where we're going to start and where we're going to end with the staff recommendation, and where we're going to start and where we're going to end if the committee passes the extension to that. So we know for the protected bike lane.
I can't pull up anything, but I could ask Heather. to
Yeah,
kind
that
of-
would even. So with your pointer, can you show where we're proposing to start on Latoria and where you were proposing to end, and where, if this motion passes, where we're going to start and where we're going to end?
Can I? What's the, does this work as a laser pointer? No. So all we have with regards to the extent of that project is that little blue blob that Joshua apologized for. So the intent would be to go to the end of the pink line on the right-hand side of that circle you're looking at, which is where the roundabout's located, which is
There.
where where Wishart is. So there's the first section.
Mhm.
Can I do this? I can't use that. Okay, so there's the first section of pink out of the orange circle. Can you point to that? Who's ever, and then there's a second set of salmon color, I think we called it.
Yeah.
To the right, which ends at Wishart.
So it's the
That's
roundabout
where we're going.
to Besington,
No, to Wishart.
to Wishart.
The first section gets you to Besington, the second section gets you from Besington to Wishart.
Okay.
That's the intended length.
Okay.
So again, we will go to the crosswalk if it makes sense to get to there. Tyler has, like I said, done the technical work on this, so he could answer whether it makes sense to get all the way there or to stop short of the intersection. But if it makes sense to get to there, we definitely have the funds to do that work.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. Taylor, is that you?
Oh, I didn't think it was me next. I just think it's a moot motion then. If you're already saying we'll get there, if
Yeah.
we have the funds that make sense, then we don't need
Yeah.
to direct you to do so. So the motion that we've already passed for Latoria covers what
Yeah.
you
So-
will do with your authority anyways.
Just for everybody's edification here, we are voting on an amendment to go down to the crosswalk. Sorry, Colin, I think you were actually next.
I think I zoned out to the answer to this. It's just a quick yes or no. The extension that we're looking at here from the Wishart to Beston, is that both sides or just the continuing on the one side? Because on that stretch, there is a buffer bike lane on the other side of the road if the satellite footage here is correct.
The intent would be just the continuation on the one side, but again, Tyler would have the answer to that specifically, and I don't want to be caught wrong. But
Yeah.
my understanding is it's all on that one side.
Okay, thank you.
From the chair's perspective, I like what I hear, and it's a great discussion. I feel like it's going to happen organically anyways. Absent some visuals or some help from Tyler, I'm going to oppose the amendment. I would like to call the question. Let's go. All those in favor? Sorry, do you have more discussion, Councillor Day?
I just wanted to point out that this is coming back to council. We only recommend to council. So we will have an opportunity at council to get further information from Tyler.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I would like to call the question now. All those in favor? Councillor Day, Mr. Sparks, opposed? Let's see. Okay, so let's. Sorry, I don't understand the question. Let's pull that back just for a second. And we're gonna do this over again. So there's an amendment. So the initial motion, this is why I severed this up. The reason. Yeah. There you go. So it's essentially taking the works from the roundabout all the way down to Victoria Creek Park. Now, does that include the amendment, Madam Corporate Officer?
Yeah, the extension.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. So firstly, the amended words, we're only considering the amendment at this time, and that is?
The
remind us.
extension from Besanton to Latoria Creek
Thank you.
Park.
Okay. And, sorry, Mr. Parkinson? Yeah. 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 So that's the original motion, and we, yeah. So my recollection is that Councillor Day made a motion and it was to continue the works through to Latoria Creek Park, in essence. But then there was an amendment to that on top of that. You amended your words to.
It was just to give clarity to
Right.
where
Yeah.
the spots were.
Okay, you built the friendly amendment in. Thank you. I love it. So we're going to bypass the amendment because it was very friendly. She amended her own motion. And then go ahead and put that back up on the screen again. I was stuck on the amendment. And that's the motion before us. We good. So when you cast your vote, you may want to have that in the front of your mind then. The point is, it's a motion on the table and we do have to bring it to a close. And I would like to wrap this up. So I would like to call this question again. All those in favor? Councillor Day and Don, that's you too. Did you get that? Thank you. Opposed? Opposed, I'm opposed. Is that everybody else? Thank you. Nobody abstained. Did you get all that, Madam Corporate Officer? Heavens to Murgatroyd, did we wrap that up? That's carried. Thank you. I would like to say that's the conclusion of my chairing for this portion of the meeting, and I gladly turn over to Councillor Day. Thank you, everybody. That took some effort, but we got there.
Thanks. Appreciate everyone's input, whether we agree or not. It's all good. Next item is 5.2, alternative cross section for Veterans Memorial Parkway. Josh, take it away.
Thank you. For this portion of the evening, I do not have a formal presentation. And I understand through a few comments back and forth that some of the attachments might have been difficult to open. So at the end, we can maybe open those and go through them, but I'll just give a brief overview. And I hope you all had a chance to read the report before tonight's meeting. So the brief overview is staff are recommending an alternative cross-section for VMP as it pertains to the active transportation amenities. So we're not proposing any change to the laning for vehicles. It's just around pedestrians and cyclist amenities. Staff currently have 2 approved projects in our financial plan. That would be the Carindale and VMP intersection, planned for design and construction this year. Likely construction will start this year, move into 2026, depending on how this evening and our subsequent council meeting go. And then the second approved portion is the design of the VMP widening from Carindale to Allendale, which is about 500 meters. We currently have an approved cross-section, which has 4 lanes of vehicle traffic or travel and a protected bike lane and sidewalk on both sides of the road. As we began looking more at this location and the approved projects we have this year, a different or an alternative cross-section sort of became apparent or an option for consideration. And this was largely due to corridor constraints as you look at things a little more closely, and then amenities relative to the more rural feeling versus the urban feeling on VMP. The alternative cross-section would see us remove the bike lane and sidewalk on both sides and replace it with a 3 to 4 meter multi-use path on the east side only. Reasons for this, I kind of alluded to it a little bit, but there would be significant cost savings, and at this early stage, it's hard to commit to exactly what those would be, but the report highlighted some early estimates and conservative ones. The ability to construct this multi-use path ahead of the 4-laning of VMP, and in addition to that, or linked to that, the ability to 4-lane at a later date. So it gives us that flexibility. It doesn't hinder the growth or amenities for vehicles in the future. We can still account for that. And it fits well, as I said before, with that rural aspect in the corridor, gives us more flexibility relative to construction execution of the project as well. So all that considered, a brief overview, but our intention after confirming the cross-section, so whether we stay with the current approved cross-section or move to this alternative, staff are really just seeking confirmation to then move into our 2 approved projects this year and get going on that work. So I'll turn it back over to questions and discussion.
Colin, go ahead.
Hi, I may have jumped the gun in terms of what I'm wanting to do here. I have an alternative cross-section to this that I would like to speak to, or is there other things that need to happen before that I speak to an alternative to our alternative?
I think all ideas are welcome.
Okay, which email should I send this to so it can get put up on the screens for people's visualization of it? The H-Power one? Okay. Yeah, I have a few on Okay, I've sent it in 2 different versions, so one of those should be able to be opened. Okay.
Can I ask a question while we're waiting?
Yeah.
Sure.
For the alternative plan that you have presented, the multi-use pathway, is it actually divided between pedestrian and bicycle in some form, or is it strictly flat asphalt?
That aspect, the technical detail on that hasn't been decided yet. It could certainly be an addition to your recommendation if that's something you feel strongly about. We'd like the flexibility at this stage to not commit to that. We'd like to go into detailed design, look at the final slopes we get. I mentioned the 3 to 5 or 3 to 4 meter width. That constraint of areas where we might have an outcropping of rock or something like that, we might look to move that to a 1 meter, which wouldn't be conducive to splitting the movements. So we just want to keep that flexibility relative to the technical aspects and being able to keep that open.
Okay, so I'm a huge fan of the multi-use pathways. I mean, they get people out of their vehicles, you know, because they got these wide, nice things you can actually, like, you know, bike or walk across this nice opening and that. But the huge thing I have with the issue on this particular road is there's a 40-50 meter elevation gain on both sides. So when you got cyclists or even electric vehicles going up or electric cycles going up and down that at mass speed, and you got people trying to do their strollers or just walking by that creates some uncomfortable awkwardness at times. And I know next to the high school along Hebringer Way, you have 2 sidewalks and a multi-use path. So I'm wondering, is it possible we can put just the same multi-use pathway on the side there, but include a crosswalk on the other side, so people who may not be so comfortable being around, cyclists going down the hill like that, have an alternative. It gives more options for people to, get out and about, and it's something people might feel far more comfortable with. And if there is cost savings even going to just this other version, then this maybe should lie somewhere in between. So I'm wondering what your guys' feedback or thoughts on this alternative thing I just kind of slapped together here.
Thanks for the proposal. There's existing infrastructure on the west side right now. Much of VMP already has a formalized sidewalk, if not a really good quality shoulder. There wouldn't be sufficient space in all of the corridor to achieve what you've proposed here, which is why we've moved exclusively to the proposed in the alternative cross section, that 4 meter path on the one side. It would mean that when and if, not if, when VMP is widened, the alignment may have to shift in areas again to avoid costly excavation into either that berm that's on the side or blasting or ripping at the rock interface there. So again, it's really meant to be at this level a conversation of, do we like that treatment in this area? Do we want to see that fit and feel for this area, that mode of transportation, that interactive piece with strollers and cyclists? There's a reason it's 4 meters and not 3 and not 2. We get that. I mean, the grades vary. There are sections that are 8%. It gets up to 8%. That's pretty steep for a multi-use path. I mean, our active transportation guidelines, they say at 8%, anything above a multi-use path isn't a great treatment, but anything below or at, it is. So we've done some of that early homework to say, yeah, this does work in this corridor. Yeah, it might be slightly uncomfortable in pieces, but it allows us to install something today or plan for installing it in the future and near future while not having to connect it to the vehicular mode of traffic or transportation, today or even in the near future. We can separate the two. Grant funding for active transportation is significantly easier to get than it is for car infrastructure. So if we separate those two projects, and this one can be done in isolation, this could be a project that's designed, sitting there ready for a grant application, should council want to proceed. So there's a bit to it in that sense. But your proposal as it stands, it would be achievable with a 2-lane. With a 4-lane for much of the corridor would not fit.
Then is it possible to perhaps, because even on the alternative, there still is the 1.5 to 2 meter section with the occasional tree and light.
Yep.
Is it possible to maybe move, just have the trees in the middle and just the lights in the middle, and kind of shift everything a bit over to still have a crosswalk, a sidewalk, I mean, on the other side, with moving some things around?
I guess the short answer is anything possible.
I guess that's kind of all for me, but I would much prefer to see perhaps somehow get across the sidewalk on the other side, just to give people the more options, or at least leave kind of a buffer space so in the future we can go back in there without having to do some mass mega tear around to try to fit that in the future, to still give people that alternative choice and still freedom to actually not have to be on the multi-use pathway and have people zipping by you, and you can actually just go to the other side if you feel uncomfortable with that. So yeah, thank you.
Apparently my fingers don't work.
I don't think it's you.
There we go. That's Stephen.
That's Stephen, yeah.
Hi. I want to commend you guys. I actually really appreciated seeing this. I actually rode that pathway on my way to the meeting here today, and I could envision a future with an amazing multi-use path. I think your suggestion is well thought out, Colin. But if we're going to look for someone to agree with the motion, I'm going to just state the obvious. I'm fully in support of this option to going to the alternative cross section. I think you guys have achieved a really good balance here. And what I liked more than anything else was the part about this being able to be decoupled from road planning, both from the planning perspective, because there's a lot of people who are going to fight 4 lanes, who are going to want 4 lanes. There's going to be, who knows when we get the $150 million that we need to do that. So let's build a bike lane as soon as we get grant funds, and let's get people riding up and down that road just like I did to the meeting here today. So thank you for that. That's what I'd like to say.
You want to go first? Okay. Okay, so a few things. Yeah, nice cross section, Colin. I guess my fear here is I just worry about conflicts between cyclists and pedestrians. When I cycle that road, when I go uphill, I'm grunting, groaning, and focused about 2 feet in front of my bike to try and get to the top of the hill. When I come down the hill, I go pretty fast with a big grin on my face from ear to ear, and it's fun. Those two things, when we add perhaps an uphill cyclist who's maybe electric and wants to pass me when I'm grunting and going slow, and somebody pushing a stroller and walking their dogs, I can't see on that piece of road or roads like that to combine in proximity the pedestrians and the bikes. I know that there's this guideline that says that these multi-use paths shouldn't be over 5%, and Josh, I think you probably know how much of that road is over 5%, and you can tell us on that. I see your point to cost savings from one route over the other. I'd kind of like to hear a little bit about how those, globally are achieved. And to cement my position in the city as a dinosaur, I have to go back to, when the road was originally built. It was originally built to access South Colwood. It was built at the time with the idea of it being a 4-lane cross section. Rumor has it that they even put the gravels down for the 4 lanes. So maybe they did, maybe they didn't. That'll be determined at some point. So when you start, if your longitudinal profile that you came out with a package showed a whole bunch of places where you're moving the center line of the road. And of course, you move a center line, that means you're adding asphalt to get up to the new center line, new center of the road, and then you're adding all the asphalt on the other side to match the crown. It's an easy technical solution to sort of draw a line that moves the center line over here to balance things out, but it can be incredibly expensive. And then I go back to whatever we do on this section of road, it essentially ties into VMP from Souk to Kelly. What have we got there? Well, we've got a 4-lane road. They're not bike lanes, they're shoulders, because it's a Ministry of Highways job, but that's what people are tying into. So that's not unexpected, I don't think. And I'm not sure why we're changing from the cross section that was originally proposed, that the cross section that was built for the Allendale project recently, with the sidewalks on both sides and the bike lanes on the road. And I don't think they're permanently buffered yet, but they could be. So I gotta be honest, is I think this needs more work, more detailed analysis between the options. And it's, you throw out numbers like it's $5 million for half the road or something. I would think a more in-depth look at what are the real alternatives and what are the real costs and where are there savings, if there are savings, prior to making this decision would be money well spent. Again, as I said, I think that the original cross section did separate the bikes from the pedestrians, which to me is important. And it provided good pedestrians. Is a sidewalk on both sides a little bit of overkill? Well, perhaps at today, but it's on both sides already. So it's just connecting what's there. So I feel that the information in front of us should have included if we stay the course with the original plan and the original cross section, what does that mean? Instead of here's a couple of new cross sections, what do they implement? So I don't think that we have the information to make the choice right now. And if we do, I'm not a big fan of either what's in front of me, or I like Colin's actually. So those are just a bunch of thoughts. I'd be interested to hear what the rest of my colleagues have to say, and if Josh can provide any clarity on where the cost savings are coming from and what we have in the way of grades in excess of 5%. Thank you.
I'm just actually, I'm just looking at the cross section here, and I understand this is about the multi-use pathway and everything, but I need to understand the whole cross section. And this is something new that I'm seeing, and I'm wondering where this median turn lane fits in because I didn't see it before. So like in the last cross section. So is this, I guess my question is this median turn lane being able to be added into a 4-lane situation because we're taking a sidewalk off one side or what have you? Like, is this what this cross section was always going to look like along Veterans?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And Stuart, I'll get back to yours because you had a couple in there. Councillor Jordison, I think in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 is the blown up version of the cross sections. From curb to curb, the cross section should be identical. So the center turn lane median, the 2 lanes of travel in either direction should be identical for both cross sections. The only thing we're proposing in this alternative cross section is the removal of the sidewalk and bike lane on both sides and the implementation of a multi-use path on the east. Stuart mentioned some deviations in the final 4-laning in the future. That would be the shifting of the center line. Much of that it's to bring up the discussion point to say if we stay with the 4 meter, stay with all our 0.6 buffer on both sides, we wanted to show that sort of not worst case, but almost best case scenario. There's a lot of room to not shift the lane as much and achieve a very similar piece, the narrowing to 3 meters where it makes sense. So again, it's those details as we get into the technical analysis and the final design will come out and make a lot of sense. At this stage, we're trying to get the indicative stance of it will work. We can make this work. Do you want it to work? Do you want to have this more rural feeling, the multi-use path, the galloping goose experience? Is that what we're looking for in this corridor? Or do we want bidirectional bike lanes and sidewalks formalized and protected on the outside and get those in 10 years, 20 years? We don't know when VMP is going to be widened. So that's really what's intended to be before us tonight. So I think to answer your question, Councillor Jordison, that is not an addition. It's common to both cross sections, or should be. Now I'm just nervous I've missed all your questions. There's one about grade, the 5%, exceeding 5%. I didn't do the math to get everything above 5%. I did the math for 8%. We're about 260 meters at 8%, which is roughly 12% of the corridor, the 2-kilometer corridor. So not insignificant. You mentioned the design guidelines that has reference to treatments to address or make accommodations for those higher grade scenarios. At this stage, conceptually, again, we don't feel it's worth throwing this concept out because we have sections of the Galloping Goose, and that's collectively 260-ish meters. It was on the Latoria end, and then the Allendale end are the 2 steepest sections. I don't recall your other questions. I apologize. Cost savings, thank you. Cost savings wise, really comes down to a couple things. The square area of hard surfacing is significantly less, and I did all the math and completely forgot to bring my notes. But working backwards from that, it came to about the $2 million in savings. But that's like literally just the hard savings around material and installation for those two. So if you go from concrete to asphalt, again, the unit rates change significantly depending on which contractor you use, what time of year you're doing it, all those kinds of things. But on average, when we went through our cost estimates and compared the two, concrete is about 2 times as expensive as asphalt per square meter. Then we go into, okay, a 4 meter, not accounting for any narrowing at 3 meters, just a straight 4 meter versus the cumulative, 8 something meters of hard surfacing, including concrete, is significantly more square area. Design costs for a multi-use path versus 2 formal sidewalks and 2 formal bike lanes. It didn't account for any of that, the soft costs, the time of the project, so indirects for the contractor. There's so many pieces that I didn't feel comfortable, or we didn't feel comfortable at this stage quantifying. But the one where we do feel comfortable is a reduction in hard surfacing and a change for materiality from concrete to asphalt. The hard math on that is about $2 million for the entire corridor. So for the stretch of the project we have approved for design right now, being that 500 meters, $800-ish thousand savings for that section just in the hard costs. there's a lot of potential savings elsewhere. There's notes to be made around realigning the road. There's some costs associated with that. Our budget comes from the DCC. I think you asked generally about our cost estimate overall. Our road DCC project has this entire corridor. It is a DCC project. So funding source, DCC, assist factor, guaranteed for the DCC program is 1%. The existing benefit for this stretch is 25%. So that means that taxpayers and Colwood is on the hook to pay 26% of this. The rest is to be covered by the DCC program. Yeah, I think that's probably all I can share at this early conceptual stage. That's where our heads are at relative to savings, budgets, and justification for the proposed alternate.
Hey, Roger.
Josh, back to my pet peeve here. They take this center median. The base of curbing is 0.2 of a meter, 200 millimeters. You've taken it off the inside lane, so now you've reduced it from 3.3 to 3.1. And again, I keep reiterating, if I drew two white lines on a surface and asked you to go 50 kilometers an hour and drive between those 2 point lines at 3.1 versus 3.7 or 3.5, you'd find it very difficult. Yet that's exactly what we're doing here. We're forcing cars coming 50 all of a sudden into a narrow area. Why don't you move that median in and give them the full 3.3, which again, I think is too narrow. My other point is when you're looking at the cross section, my understanding at Carindale is going to be a set of lights. And from when I looked at the figures, it was going to be like 1.39 million or something to put those lights in. So at that cost, why aren't you considering a roundabout? That's the number one thing the Ministry of Transportation is insisting that municipalities look at. And yet we seem to keep ignoring it. So my question to you, when we're spending 1.39 million to keep cars idling on a route that we want people to move on, why aren't we putting a roundabout? I've heard the excuses, not at the top of a hill, imbalance, but none of that holds water with me. So what's the reason why we're not considering a roundabout there?
Through the chair. Initial intent, we'll talk, if you're okay, we'll do the roundabout piece first, and then we can talk about your lane width. The roundabout piece, actually, it was staff's intent to put a roundabout in. We're actually intending to put a roundabout in at Suka-Machojan, and eventually, once Beachlands gets built out at Latoria and Machosen. When we got down to looking at it prior to actually considering the design, there's just too many things that didn't allow us to get to a roundabout. I don't want to argue the semantics of, angle of approach and area that was needed in the blasting of the area, and the fact that the roundabout probably would have been 3 million instead of 1.25 million. It just landed through the traffic engineers. I don't know completely your background. Mine isn't in traffic engineering, so I rely on professionals with regards to their advice. Their advice was to go with the traffic signal there. That's the way we're proceeding. With regards to the laning, I think if anybody's driven VMP, and I'm one of them guilty, I very easily climb up to 70 very quickly. It's a wide road. It's not intentional, but I catch myself all the time doing speeds like 70. Again, if we get out into that, I think in a lot of ways it's a dual-edged sword in that I love VMP with regards to the feel and the opportunities that we have as a community there. I drive Souk all the time, and I feel like it very easily could have that New York feeling to it, concrete, asphalt. We're soon going to have buildings growing there that are 6 stories, whatever, all the way through it. And VMP has this real rural feel to it, like I'm still out in the country, I'm still enjoying myself. And that's part of the reason why we decided to put extra work in and think about a multi-use path there, because it still gives us that feeling of a small town, but gets cars through. And we don't want to get to 3.5 lanes. We're eventually going to have to go to 4 lanes. That is a fact. I don't know if it'll be in my lifetime, but it is a fact.
And if we get those lanes to 3.5 or 3.6, people will do 70 and 80. They do it on Souk now, and those lanes aren't that wide. So we don't want to promote that speed. I'm okay with making motorists uncomfortable at 3.5 or 3.3. I mean, it's an arterial, so we won't get down to 3.1. But we are intentionally trying to keep these speeds down in that corridor. You know, you do a lot of math, you have a lot of numbers. For 2 kilometers, if you do 10 kilometers an hour less, you're only adding a couple of seconds to your commute. It's not the end of the world. And like you say, it's one swerve, one icy patch that can change somebody's life forever. So I'm okay with narrow roads, and I'm okay with drivers being uncomfortable traveling at high speeds, even on arterials for short stretches, not on the Trans-Canada Highway, not when you're traveling from the Nanaimo to, you know, Victoria, but when you're traveling from, you know, Latoria to Souk, I'm okay that it takes an extra 10 or 15 seconds. So it is intentional without direct input from council telling us to widen those lanes. Staff will continue to narrow them to try to keep speeds down as well as they can. But certainly if this committee wants to see wider lanes, it would be within your ability to ask us to do so.
Any follow-up? David?
I just wanted to share a comment. I also echo Seven's point about decoupling from road planning. I think that's great. The idea of a grant coming up and being able to do something and get things moving, possibly sooner than the road work is amazing. But what we can't ignore is the language that staff has used when we think of this decoupling, is that it's inevitable that BMP will be 4 lanes. And so if the only mode of safely traveling along BMP outside of a car is on one side of the road, and the majority of people or more people live on the other side, I think we would be naive not to think of the impact to that arterial road of people having to cross consistently and periodically along that road in order to get to that multi-use path. So I certainly love the idea of save money, decouple it. I like the rural feel. I like multi-use paths, but I also really like Colin's idea of at least preserving a small sidewalk so that when people are on that side of the way, they can at least get to and from without having to get to a crosswalk, possibly walking in a ditch to get there in the meantime. So I don't know where that fits with respect to what we have in front of us, but for everybody to think about, we can't ignore the fact that decoupling is great, but it's inevitable BMP will be 4 lanes.
I made through the chair. I think that in the now, I kind of mentioned there's an existing sidewalk on the west side for much of VMP. A lot of the intersections that go onto VMP right now, like Carindale, will already be a signalized intersection. We don't know what the future is going to look like relative to intersection treatments as traffic continues to grow. But we do know we already have a crosswalk at Havenwood Park or very near it. We have the large anticipated developments near there in close proximity to that crossing. So much of the people that are going to be accessing sidewalks and wanting to get to that multi-use path already have access to the other side of VMP, which again is that choice to, or what leads us to the east side for that treatment. But you're not wrong. There will be isolated sections or pieces that need to, return back down to Latoria. So we'll have to look at those, and we'll have to, this cross section shows a center median that would be, well over 1 kilometer. We're likely not going to actually build that. It would be really difficult to maintain, costly to install. So maybe the road could narrow there and a sidewalk could be implemented in that isolated zone. A lot of these, the turn lane is just that, it's a turn lane. So it's storage for a left-hand turn. Those are going to be close to those intersections. So we'll have to play with that in that topography. That will come into the detailed design. But to formally put a sidewalk for the entire corridor wouldn't be in line with what we're proposing with this alternate. But to get people from that west side to that east side is within the design intent of this cross section safely.
Kim?
Thanks. I'd just like to move the staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a couple more speakers. Can I come back to you for that?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Uh, I I like what I'm hearing here. Yeah. Some of the interactions for Mr. Baylis or Mr. Rosenberg, you've asked us to consider a multi-use path in isolation, but yet I'm looking at a full cross section. So I mean, are we looking at one without the other? I mean, presumably, if we elect to build a 4-meter path, some point in the future, that cross section will come back for 2 lanes, 4 lanes, the middle buffered portion, or what have you. Like that's a different day, a different discussion. Like, really, are we trying to be clinical here and just talk about the 4-meter path? Am I right? Because your motion talks about cross section. So I guess my question is, if all I want is the path, but I have concerns about the cross section, how do I extrapolate that?
That's a good question. And
I have my moments.
I think when we think about this corridor, there's a riparian area that we have to worry about. And the west side has some issues on it. Really what we're trying to figure out is how to build the intersection today, because it's going to be built today. And then still leave our options open for tomorrow with regards to how we serve the community. And the hard part is trying to visualize decades ahead of ourselves, because as early as 2015, our master plan said that Souk Road from VMP to Jacqueline was only going to be 2 lanes. And I mean, the cars on that road now are just crazy. So if we know that we're going to attempt to put a 4-lane or 4-meter, for the most part where we can, section in, then we'll be able to push that on the west side. The intent would be, once we get through the intersection, depending on where we go, and for instance, designing the next piece down to Allendale, would be to push it as far away as we can from the current roadway. And by doing that without blasting the hillside or impacting creeks or any of that, and any kind of future project heading towards Latoria, it allows us everything towards the west to then be flexible. So we'll have to be somewhat strict with regards to the intersection that we're designing now. But then once we get away from that, we have that flexibility of, in pockets, putting in some extra sidewalk. And again, staff is just trying to, marry up council philosophies and climate change in the future. So it might make sense to have an informal paved path for sections on the other side, but to put something formal from Allendale all the way to Latoria on the west side, although on paper it looks great, from a cost benefit analysis and the number of pedestrians that you would put on that sidewalk, I could see dollars being spent way more efficiently and effectively in other places of the city. So I wouldn't anticipate that we do that, because one of the great things about VMP is there's not a lot of developable land. Like, a lot of the subdivisions are built and they're 20, 30 meters higher. There's a lot of parkland. Havenwood straddles both sides of it. Everything from Carindale towards Latoria on the west side has already been built up in Marianne Crescent area. So it's going to remain and stay rural unless council decides to formalize it all. So it just gives us the ability to be flexible in the future and mindful for today. So that's our hope with regards to that piece. And then at some point, if we wanted to still, once we get out of that intersection, put concrete sidewalks on both sides all the way down to Latoria, we could. We still could put concrete sidewalks all the way from Carindale down to Allendale. Just within the intersection, we would build it right now for just that one little piece. And we are, as Joshua said, intent on making sure that the existing connections that exist and the future anticipated connections that we know that will exist will have crosswalks to get us on that other side. And if they're not functional or they don't work, then we can put segments of sidewalks in to make connections to get to the functional crosswalks. So it's really difficult from a concept point of view without getting into detailed design to answer some of these questions. I know it's a lot to take in, especially when it's not what you do for a living, right? So I get that it's difficult to do, and it's futuristic in a lot of the forethought that goes there. Okay. But we just saw an opportunity from a staff perspective to bring something forward that we think might be an opportunity with regards to keeping the feel of the corridor now as it exists, knowing that it will quite likely be decades before we see 4 lanes there.
Thank you. I love all that. Thank you so much. To be fair, I'm not afraid of the 4-meter path. Quite frankly, where they exist in town and various communities, I mean, they're quite comfortable and, accommodate, several people all at once passing each other without difficulty. So what I've heard tonight is some concerns about high-speed cyclists. Is there an opportunity to, we build the 4-meter path, we find there's some interactions, I take it there's some kind of minor engineering solution we could implement to help mitigate that? I have a history degree, sorry, John, so.
There's always solutions. It's a matter of cost.
Gotcha.
I mean, we could put pickets up.
Sure.
I probably shouldn't, but I would like to rely on some people's generosity of space with regards to if I'm on an electric bike and I see a mother and a 4-year-old toddler,
Great.
I'll be considerate enough to slow down, knowing that the toddler's likely not going to walk in a straight line and not just go, I'll take my chances. The toddler gets in my way, it's on them.
We all,
So
we can't
I
legislate good behavior. I
correct.
get you.
So we can put pickets up as an easy fix for some of those tough areas. We can, spend a little money and change the grade in some of those tougher areas where we go, maybe that's one of the treatments when we get to design where we go, those % grades, we actually do like a 4-inch or 6-inch difference in elevation so that the cyclist can't get into the pedestrian area easily. So there's treatments like that when we get to the design stage.
Perfect.
Where we could spend some more money figuring that out. But this conceptual stage, I can't tell you where that's going to happen.
Okay.
It's certainly something we're going to think about with regards to trying to provide an amenity that is conducive to people wanting to be in that space.
Thank you. I understand the difficulty in being a specific when we're really dealing with this in a general fashion, but help me out just again briefly. Like there's 4 meters there. Why would we not think about like just 2-meter sidewalk and what is it, the 1.8 separated bike lane with a curb?
You could.
Okay, is that, I take it that would be more costly or what? I mean, this.
Oh, certainly it would be more costly, yes.
Okay, so it's expensive. I got you. Thank you. And I think that's about it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, but Colin, I'm going to put you up first.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is pretty much with the 4-meter multi-use path on the side that we're pretty much trying to make that room to have that there, maybe have future things available in there. If we can still make sure we're considering that maybe the other areas that we have to have maybe a few inch separation between the cyclists and pedestrians. So, those top tier speeds where they're going down, they're not, causing any conflicts, or just leaving that in mind room to maybe have future sidewalks in the design consideration, then I could be very happy in supporting a multi-use pathway, just trying to, be very much in mind that, cyclists are going to be, not too smart and they're going to go very fast down there. And that might also harm active transportation projects. People are going to like, this person went 1,000,000 miles by me. Why should we still have this more of these pathways? And that could harm, future projects. So just keeping this in mind, the design, when you get to the design phase of making sure there's room to still maybe we need to make an emergency project where you just put in a sidewalk next to it, have the 4-meter be a full bike lane thing, have a sidewalk next to it to just separate them if things get too bad, and just keeping that, space consideration in mind where we may have to, fully separate the two in the future. And if that can be done, then I'll be very happy to support it. So thank you.
Joshua mentioned something. I mean, when you look at the cross sections, and again, when you're visualizing, that cross section is illustrated to show you what can fit in the entire width of the corridor. The actual median that you see in the middle there probably would only be used. And again, these are the kinds of things that when council gets down to actually looking at the designs and we put something in front of them for them to say yes to, that's where we start talking about, do we want to see trees in boulevards? Do we want to see trees or other kind of treatments in medians? And do we want to see it for the length of the corridor, or do we just want to have a divided center line? And that's where that ability to add more infrastructure by not adding a median or having your boulevards narrower gives you that flexibility to have those different treatments on those grades to allow us to do that. But until we get into that design phase that allows us to consider different treatments and different widths of some of those flexible spaces like medians and boulevards to actually take advantage of areas or fix problems that are created with activity as it gets higher, right? Because in the beginning, we probably won't see a lot of bike and a lot of pedestrians, but as we get more populated, it'll get heavier and heavier and more conflicts will come, and then we'll pivot. So again, it could be one of those things where that 4-meter asphalt path serves us very well for 10 to 20 years. And then we have to pivot into a more formal area where we do a grade difference and we do a concrete treatment instead of an asphalt treatment. And again, I would say that, you know, doing that, especially if we can get grants for that separated piece between Latoria and Carindale for this distance in the future so that the community can use it for the next 20 years before we formalize that corridor more with extra lanes, it's an opportunity with grant funding for us to really save some dollars because there is a lot of funds out there for that active transportation piece and the densification of Olympic View, which is, you know, coming in the next 20 years, more work on Latoria area. So it will come and it'll be a great opportunity for us to do one without the other if we can.
Thank you. I'd be very interested to see what kind of design considerations if that comes our way in the future. But so thank you. Yeah, as long as we have that huge kind of the flexibility on the side there to maybe we had to play around a whole thing. But yeah, I think leaving a whole side there to play around with now, maybe having that 4-meter pathway, maybe in the future having to, you know, do a complete, you know, maybe a whole Dutch style big time separation on the side there. Who knows what happens? But I think leaving that whole space on the side there that we can play around now in the future could give us options that, you know, we may not be seeing just now yet. So thank you for that.
Okay, so I have Roger as well, but I have 2 quick questions that I just want to make sure we consider. So council gave a directive that any infrastructure that we build is to be pushed right to the property line. So would this multi-use trail go right to the property lines?
Almost certainly not. What staff's understanding is direction is where we can, we do it, and where we can't, we come back and explain to council why we can't. So in this particular case, throughout VMP, if we were to try to put it at the back of property line, we would have to go up 30 meters from the existing height of VMP and then drop back down at the intersections and at the parks. So I'm not sure if there's any area, there's a riparian area on the one side that would cause us not to be able to go behind it to do the sidewalk there. So my anticipation would be when we bring the designs back to council, part of their consideration would have to be that they won't be at the back of sidewalks, or if they are, it'll be a completely different experience. And even the cross section itself shows 30 meters or the cross section width, but the cross section area in VMP is almost in some cases 40 meters wide, 45 meters wide. It hasn't been blasted out to its full width, so almost certainly would not get to the back of the property line as intended.
Great. So if we were only to consider this multi-use path from Carindale to close to the Allendale intersection, the Patterson Pit driveway, I guess, would be the best delineator I could think of where the trucks currently come out. Would that be a viable project? Or would you only consider the project if you could consider going all the way to Latoria?
I'll take a shot. Sure. Through the chair. I think that we would like to see the treatment considered for the whole corridor. The project we have in our financial plan is designed from Carindale to Allendale, so that's why we're seeking clarity on the treatment right now for that design. My worry would be we get approval, we design from Carindale to Allendale, we build that, and then we have an existing cross-section that is approved for the remainder of it, and then we have to revert back and get people across to a sidewalk and bike lane. It wouldn't make sense from a technical perspective. So what we're proposing and what we'd like to get clarity on is an alternate cross-section for all of VMP, but recognizing, like John had mentioned, the detailed designs still need to come back. Our financial plan doesn't contemplate any projects further towards Latoria from Carindale. It's only the intersection and Carindale to Allendale. So I think that That would be how I would answer that.
Yeah, well, you're mentioning Allendale, but Allendale doesn't have any space for a multi-use path there. There
Sorry.
is already a sidewalk built. So it's only the Pattison Pit driveway area, which is the end of the sidewalk, up to Carindale currently available. So I'm just, I guess I'm very concerned. If you were asking me, would I approve building a multi-use path? That would be very different than asking me to approve a completely different cross-section for the entire length of this road when we haven't even finalized our transportation master plan. So I'll just leave it there and I'll go to Roger.
Thank you. I like the concept, I really do, but I won't be voting in favor of it. And the reason why I won't be voting in favor, because when it comes to 4-laning Latoria, doing the intersection, doing the pipe path, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar project. And if it is, $1.5 million more to put a roundabout in is insignificant. Probably 2% to the overall cost, maybe 3%. I don't know, because I don't know what the total cost would be. And especially when we're trying to be environmentally friendly, we're adding another set of lights where cars, lots of cars, by your own numbers, are going to be sitting there idling, pumping CO2 into the atmosphere when they could actually be moving. You've got cars coming up a hill in Carindale that could swing out without stopping in winter, easier acceleration to keep in motion so we don't have slipping and sliding down Carindale. I think it's a very bad idea not to consider the roundabout. I do like the concept, but also I do not like the idea of narrowing the lanes or reducing them any smaller. John's right, it may slow them up, but there's no guarantee. People will drive what people feel comfortable driving. And you'll get the young person in there doing 90 miles an hour down that narrow lane. So I think keeping lanes to a reasonable width to make it safer for all to drive, especially when you got big trucks going up there hauling excavators, gravel trucks going up there, cement trucks going up there. There's not a lot of room for them to maneuver on that width. And I would really encourage people to, or council, to make the motion that the minimum width of a road be 3.5 or 3.7, whatever, and maybe your smaller streets 3.1 or 3.3, because I just think it's an unproven theory. And I would like to see the road width maintained, and for environmental reasons, I would like to see roundabouts installed. And so if they're not going to do that, I can't support this, although the concept I think is phenomenal.
Councillor Jordison, you wanted to make the motion? The staff recommendation?
Yeah.
So the motion is the recommendation from staff, moved by Councillor Jordison. Any discussion on the motion? It's right in the report. That the Active Transportation and Special Infrastructure Committee recommend to Council that the Veterans Memorial alternative cross-section be endorsed for VMP from existing infrastructure at Latoria Road intersection to the existing infrastructure in proximity to Allendale Road in place of the 30-meter right-of-way cross-section. Okay, thank you. Colin.
Is it possible we can, I guess everything's possible. Could we maybe add to this in the cross section to make sure there is still space to add in a future crosswalk, whether that's, west sounds very difficult, but to at least have a space to have a future crosswalk be added to next to the 4-meter pathway in case things get too difficult with cyclists, to still have that space option. And I know in the past we made a recommendation to staff or council, one of the two, about intersections being protected designs. instead of the current, conflict white, green paint on the ground, that causes a lot of issues for them. We made a recommendation for it to be protected. Would the intersections along this be following that? Or is there, certain constraints that are preventing that? And then we're to continue going down the very dangerous intersection designs that would be included in this?
Staff?
Thank you for the question. Inside of our terms of reference, we would put a hierarchy of active transportation. And inside of that, then the analysis would be done based on ridership, anticipated future ridership, vehicular movements, pedestrians, all those things. So we wouldn't jump initially right to a protected intersection. That's a serious upgrade. But we would certainly be considering it. It would be our first, we'd go there and then see if it's justified or not. So we go through that hierarchy, similar to what we do for roundabout. So we assume roundabout first, evaluate it. Does it work? Does it make sense? Yes, no, and then move on.
Okay, thank you. And how are we able to add perhaps that on top of the, we endorse this certain alternative design cross-section, but to include there to be space of a sidewalk in the future, like the space being available in the design?
So to do that, you would propose an amendment, and the amendment might be to the 30-meter right-of-way cross-section plus sidewalk on the opposite side.
I would like to do that, yeah.
Okay, so that's a proposed amendment of adding 30 meters plus a crosswalk on the west side. Okay. Sorry, sidewalk. I was stumbling over that myself.
It doesn't have to actually get built with a 4 meter, but at least have the space available there so that in the future, we're not having to tear things up to, try to make it fit in the future.
So my understanding would be that our cross-section, we're being asked to endorse an alternative cross-section. And what your amendment would propose is the alternative cross-section plus the width of a sidewalk on the west side to that proposed. Now, the cross-section means that we plan for that. It doesn't mean that we build that right away.
Yeah, it's so just to have the space available there so we can have that as an option in the future.
It's the plan. So just looking to our corporate officer to see if she's able to capture that amendment.
Thank you. I was starting to craft two separate motions to get your point across, but if you'd like to read what I have on the screen there.
Okay.
Can you make it a little bigger for those of us who are old and blind?
Sidewalks, not crosswalks.
Yeah, sidewalks, sorry.
I think it's just a sidewalk, but it sounds like the west side is a very difficult thing with the blasting. I was looking at some of the elevation stuff, but just to have the space available. Yeah, the bottom one, I think I'd be happy that unless someone else has an alternative.
Yeah, just singular sidewalk and on the west side.
Would it not be the east side to go with the 4 meter? I mean, my cross section that I had earlier, yeah, was the west side, but it sounds like there's a lot of geographical constraints on that side. So maybe have that just to have that on like the east side along with the 4 meter, so that if we had to do an expansion to make sure people are protected from erratic cyclists, that the space is available there in the future.
Sorry. Go ahead, staff.
Thank you, Chair. Within the alternative cross-section, there's 5.1 meters of flexible space that I think can fit what would be an alternative path of say 1.2 to 1.5 meters for a sidewalk to fit in on the west side. So we could narrow boulevards and or narrow medians to fit it, knowing that's the intent moving forward. I mean, our intent is to, like I say, keep the corridor flexible. So the multi-use path will be pushed up against
as far away from the existing roadway as we can and as close to the property line as we can, because we recognize from council's perspective, the ideal is property line. And then we work from there. I mean, they're not going to spend millions putting it on property line when they can spend 100,000 putting it in a place that works. So that would be our intent, and looking at the cross section, absolute worst case, we'd have 5 meters of flexibility to fit something in. So I don't want to say with certainty it can happen, but what I can say is the cost. I mean, if we don't, then we just start moving things and blasting things out of the corridor, right? So we can still do it. It's always about cost and benefit, right? So staff's goal is to do exactly what you're saying without being told, this is what you should do. That is what we try to do. That's part of what we do as our business case. So I'd be quite comfortable not being told to do that, knowing that that is staff's objective, if that helps the committee try to figure out this decision.
Okay, so you're saying that there'll be space we can put in sidewalks in later if need be, and that's still available on the current cross section of the alternative.
The
route?
only thing that would change is it might be a decision where council goes, how much is that gonna cost to do that? And how many people are gonna walk on it? And we're gonna go, it's gonna be an extra million. And we think right now for the first 3 years, it'll be 10 people. 20 years from now, it'll be 300 people. And they go, okay, let's spend it today, or they might say, let's spend it tomorrow. So that ability to physically put it in will be there.
Okay, then I will not need to have this
Okay, you can
alternative
withdraw.
recommendation, so it can be removed.
And I'll go to Kim.
I think if I'm not mistaken, that's the same size that the Galloping Goose is as well. So to put it into perspective, and it seems to be working size-wise for that area. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, I see, oh, your mic
Oh,
is still
sorry.
on. That's the problem. Is there anyone that had any issue they wanted to discuss before I call for the vote? Not seeing any, I will call those in favor and those opposed. That is our member Conrad, member Parkinson, and myself are opposed. All right, and that brings us to the end, if you can possibly believe it, at 8:57 at night. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by member Sparks.
That it?
Is it?